Old Homes Make Old Noises. Written by Sadder Dead. A story on No Sleep. I don't remember much about living with both of my parents. My very first memory is that of my mother sitting in a sun chair on the front porch, listening to the radio, napping behind her wide sunglasses. I was sitting next to her with a pink dino plushie and quietly playing. I would look up at her, and she'd be so still, as if paralyzed by the sun. I remember imagining her never moving again, that she would stay in that chair forever, never to play with me. But as soon as I felt that sad little tug in my heart, she would rustle from her sleep and comfort me. She was right there. Everything was okay. For now. I don't remember their separation or why it happened. I was very young. My mother was moving out, and they decided I was to stay with my dad. There was never a big fight, no screaming, just 4 large suitcases loaded into a red Toyota, a kiss on the cheek, and a wave goodbye. That was it. Like she was going to the store. I was too young to understand, but I knew I should be sad. I could feel it. She wanted to visit, but she lived on the other side of the country. She would send me postcards and presents, but I didn't get to see her. My father met a new woman, and while I wouldn't call her mom, she turned into everything but name. It's just how these stories go sometimes. But things are so rarely simple. I learned that the year I turned 12. My father passed away in an accident. They pulled me out of school to tell me, and it felt like falling into a nightmare. You start to question everything. Every sensation becomes unreal as you look for anything to convince you it's a dream. I couldn't fathom it. After that, things went fast. My stepmother fought to get custody of me, but we didn't have the papers. I wasn't technically adopted. We'd talk about it, but we never went through it. As such, the next in line to care for me was my biological mom, on the other side of the country. They contacted her, fully expecting her to relinquish custody. But that's not what happened. She said yes. So I was pulled out of school, had my room packed, and sent across this country, Wyoming to Florida. By the time I got there, I was still in a daze. It had all gone by so fast, and I had a hard time adjusting. It was one of those things, being told that everyone loves you and wants to care for you. But it's another feeling when you see your life being put into a box. You get some perspective, and it's strange perspective to grasp at that age. The first thing I saw when I arrived at my mother's house near Crystal River was a sun chair. Not the same one she had back at our house when I was little, but the same kind. There was also a little table with a battery-powered radio and an ashtray. I don't remember that she smoked. But then again, I barely remember her at all. When she came running out of the house, it was hard to see her as mom. To me, she was just Aline. Even with the sunglasses and the arms stretched out, she looked nothing like I remember. Still, she swept me up, kissed me, and assured me, "It's gonna be okay, baby girl," she sobbed. "It's all gonna be okay." It was an old house, much older than the one we lived in. 2 floors. Every room had their wood paneling that looked like they toppled over from a stiff breeze. It was clean and well kept, but there were certain spots and corners that had a slight tinge of mildew. Lots of pictures on the walls, mostly of her, but a few of me and Dad as well. Not other men, it seemed. A couple of friends, perhaps. "We're gonna have so much fun," she assured me. "I'll show you all around town. You know, you can swim with manatees, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Read it in an article." "Well, ain't that exciting? Huh?" She showed me my room, talking about everything and nothing. I could tell she was nervous, but I couldn't fault her for trying to keep a straight face. She could probably tell I wasn't okay. Then again, would I ever be? Those first few days are a blur. I had a room with a nice bed. She helped me put up posters and connect my laptop to the internet. It was just a shitty wireless connection, but it was better than nothing. We didn't get great reception out there. Something about being too close to the coast. It wasn't really the middle of nowhere. There were pretty lively neighborhoods, but it wasn't the most modern area. Aline was happy to show me around. She introduced me to everyone, waving happily, and tried to make me feel welcome. She would ask me about everything from subjects in school to favorite music. We should go to the movies, we would hang out at the park, go swimming, all kinds of stuff. But it all just felt hollow. In a way. Like it wasn't real life. School was different too. I mean, it had to be. It was a new class with new people. It couldn't be the same, and being new is a coin flip. You're either everyone's favorite or a social pariah. I ended up somehow as both. I remember coming home one day after living with Aline for about a month. I was tired. I'd been spending so time with some new friends I met in English class, while dodging some catty know-it-all who kept bugging me during lunch. It was a social minefield, and coming home to my safe place felt like recharging a battery. I put on some music and danced around the room, but after a couple of seconds, a picture on the wall came down. A framed photo of me and my mom from when I was small. It crashed on the floor, but the glass didn't break. I jumped, almost dropping my headphones, and settled down. I carefully hung it back onto its nail and stepped away. I must have moved too much. The house was old, and I kept forgetting that. As I turned back to my laptop, the picture fell again. This time, I was barely moving at all. I put the picture up a third time and looked closely. I didn't move. As I looked, I saw the nail in the wall being pushed out. And for the third time, the picture came crashing onto the floor. This time, the glass broke. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe there was mold or something behind the wall. I couldn't smell anything, even when I put my face next to it. But it could be a dozen of things. All my other pictures were fine, though. It was just this one. Strange. I had Aline put a screw instead. They seemed to hold, but that incident made me keep my eye open. And I started to notice other things around the house. For example, if you went into the basement, you could hear the strange pitter-patter behind the dryer. I figured it was rats, but it seemed a little too clean. Besides, Aline had never mentioned there being rats, and she talked a lot. But I tried my best not to think of it. An old house makes noises. That's nothing new. I wasn't living in a ghost story. No one was. But then there was the pantry. The kitchen had an old sort of walk-in pantry for storing dry goods. It was more like a closet, if anything. Aline used it to store things for her baking. She rarely used it, and I rarely left my room. But the few times I went down to the kitchen, I'd grab a handful of almonds and some raisins for a quick snack. And even now and then, I'd hear something. Sometimes it'd sound like a closing door. Other times it'd be a quick tap on the wall. This one time, a bag of flour flew off the shelf as I opened the door. Sometimes I'd just stay and listen. And when I did, I could almost always hear something on the other side. Something moving. Crinkling paper bags, a rasping like some heavy being dragged against the hollow wood. I mentioned this to Aline during one of our dinners. She made pasta carbonara. I think you got rats or something, I said. Rats? There's no rats. Well, you got something, I said. In there. I nodded the pantry. She frowned a little and went over to check, turning it over a couple of bags and a sack of potatoes. I don't see anything, she said. You sure? You gotta listen, I said. You don't see it, you hear it. I'll have to take your word for it. We finished dinner in silence, but I could tell this bothered her. She kept looking at the pantry every now and then, as if it were waiting for it to expose itself. She would keep doing this on and off for the next few days. I'd see her standing in the kitchen, still as a statue, listening. She'd shush me if I got too close. Shh, I heard it, she'd tell me. I swear, I heard it. At least I wasn't the only one. But Aline was taking it much harder than I was. For me, it was just a bit weird. And I figured she'd call the exterminator. But she was taking it into her own hands. She can have something destroy her picture-perfect future with her estranged daughter, after all. So her newfound obsession turned from a strange quirk to downright invasion. After about a week, she was fed up and had begun breaking wood panels in the pantry to check the walls. She was convinced there was some kind of burrow behind it. But she didn't find anything. Aline would rip out the entire pantry, leaving an item on the kitchen table. I'd have nowhere to sit for dinner, so I'd just start eating in my room. I'd hear her go crazy downstairs with power tools, ripping into the walls. It'd make the whole entire house shake. Now pictures were falling off the walls, and I couldn't tell if it was from the house or from Aline. Then one day, as I got home from school, she met me in the hall. She had these big safety goggles on, and her eyes were going wide. I found it, she said. Come on, I'll show you. I just gotta put this away. No, she insisted. It'll just take a second. She took me by the arm. I pulled away, giving her a cold look. I want to put this away, I repeated. She looked me up and down, and she took a deep breath and nodded. All right, just hurry. She tore out the back of the wall of the pantry, taking down the shelves. Turns out the back wall was just a thin wooden layer, some insulation, and then a hollow space. It was about 2 feet wide and went through most of the wall. I think they skimped on the insulation when they built this place, she said. Something's hiding up there. I told you, rats. It's not rats. She snapped at me, slamming her fist on the wall. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped back. She was breathing heavily. She wasn't blinking. I'm not telling you again, she continued. There are no rats. There's never been rats. This is a good house. Okay, fine, I mumbled. It's not rats. She didn't say anything. She just adjusted her safety goggles, picked up her cordless saw, and got back to it. I ended up staying in my room more often than not. Aline kept working on the downstairs bathroom, tearing up the tile floor to check underneath. Of course, she didn't find anything. Every day she'd suggest something new. Maybe there were raccoons, possums, maybe snakes. Looking deep enough under the floor, she even found that they'd been insulated with old newspaper and sacks of dry grass and blue sunflowers. Something regional, I guess. Aline was furious. For all the years I've lived here, I've never had this problem, she said. I don't know why it starts now. It doesn't make sense. It's not a big deal, I assured her. It's probably nothing. But it's not nothing, though, is it? It's something. We both heard it. Yeah, but who cares? You're tearing up the house. Better me than them. We barely talked for a whole week. She would still help me around the house when she could, but as soon as the bare necessities were out of the way, she got back to tearing up the floor. She tried using traps and poisons, but wouldn't catch anything. One day, I found her sitting on a pile of debris in the hallway. She was exhausted. She had dark circles under her eyes. I felt a bit sorry for her, so I sat down on the staircase to keep her company. You should get some rest, I said. Not like give up. Just take a break. I'm good, she panted. Just give me a sec. Don't you ever use that sun chair anymore? I asked. You used to love those. The what? The sun chair, I said. The one out front. She looked at me for a while, not understanding what I was saying. Then something clicked. Right. That. I don't really use that. Why not? What kind of life is that? Just lounging around, waiting for something to happen. And with that, she got up on her feet. She turned to me, power tool in hand. She was making a point. Sometimes you gotta do something. The next time the picture of her and me fell off from the wall, I didn't bother putting it back up. There was no point. It would keep falling over and over again anyway. I just had to accept that my life was full of whirling, chopping, and clanking. I still barely knew the woman I lived with, and I was supposed to accept whatever nonsense she came up with. But one day, when I came home, she wasn't chopping the floor anymore. Instead, she was sitting on the stair leading up to the front door, holding a bucket. And for the first time in weeks, Aline looked satisfied. When I came up to her, she tapped the side of the bucket. Check it, she said. Told you it wasn't rats. Cane toads. About 24 of them in total. One of them hopped out of the pantry, she continued. I had to check around the basement, but they made a nest around in an old pipe. So, that's it? I asked. You got 'em all? Sure did. And I plugged up their nest, so we're done. We're done? She swept me up in a hug and kissed me on the side of the head. I felt so relieved. Maybe she could be normal again. Aline talked about bringing in a carpenter to fix the problems she found while breaking open the walls. Meanwhile, she settled on hastily assembling a couple of plywood pieces. We would have to use the upstairs shower for now to avoid water damage. She eventually returned to her usual cheery self. I'd see her dancing around the kitchen to hits from the 90s. We made our own scones one weekend, and not long after that, she returned to work. She had taken some time off to get me set up. For now, she was getting more confident. She worked as a county recorder, so she usually sat at a desk all day, or in a long-winded meeting. It was nice not having to worry about her anymore. I could focus on just keeping my newfound social life alive. At that age, that's easier said than done. One day, I came home talking on the phone with a friend from school. We were discussing a group English project and how we were supposed to motivate a slacker to contribute. It was nice to talk to someone who despised group projects as much as I did. I threw my backpack on my bed, turned around, and stopped. The picture on the wall was back. Now, I knew for a fact I hadn't put it back up there. I also knew Cane Tones weren't to blame. So, it had to be Aline. But a part of me kept thinking, what if it wasn't? I agonized over this for a while. If it wasn't Aline, it must have been someone else. But did I want to bring that to her attention? I'd seen the way she got upset over a couple of Cane Tones. Who knew what she'd do if she suspected an actual intruder? I decided it was better to keep quiet and to keep an ear to the ground. Despite Aline's best efforts, things weren't as simple as a couple of toads poking around in the basement. Things were still moving in the pantry. I'd still hear something pushing against the wood panels, and at times I'd see pictures moving on their own. But I kept my mouth shut. Aline was like a different person. She was cheerful, motivated, and curious. We'd talk about my day, take turns buying groceries and making all kinds of plans together. I was allowed to come and go freely, as long as she could keep tabs on me. Typical mom stuff. But I'd still see the little things around the house. Once I even moved a picture of myself, and when I came back, it was fixed, straightened. And Aline had been gone all day. I would test this a little further each day. I'd place things around the house and take pictures with my phone. Later, I'd compare them to see if anything did. Sometimes they did. For example, pictures were straightened. A couple of cans in the pantry were rearranged to have the labels pointing outwards. A few candle holders on a dresser downstairs were fixed to be the same height. Little pointless things. I think the most noticeable thing was my stuffed animals. I only had a few from my old house, and I kept them on a chair in the corner. They were rearranged to always face outward. I didn't do that, but it wasn't clear how this was happening, or why. And I didn't want to bring it up with Aline. Maybe she was doing it to mess with me. A test. I decided to unpack my final box. I'd been putting it off, since it was the most nostalgic stuff. But I figured it was time to bite the bullet. Picture of me, my dad, and my stepmom. Little trinkets and doodads, and of course, my old pink dino plushie I'd had since I was a baby. Dad used to say it was the first thing anyone gave me. As I walked around the room, putting it all up, Aline walked in. She helped me rearrange some things, made some small talk, and finally picked up the dino plushie. "Well, isn't this a handsome fellow?" she said. "What's his name?" It was such a strange question. It didn't have a name. She should have known that. Then again, it'd been a while, but I decided to mess with her. "Don't you remember?" I said. "It's Kenny." "Right, Kenny," she nodded. "Glad to see he's still around." She was probably trying to make me feel at home still. But it was weird. She was lying. It made me question what else she might be lying about. It didn't take Aline long to notice I was up to something. She noticed me taking pictures and rearranging things. It was her house, after all. She, if anyone, would notice if something was different. So one day, as we sat down at dinner, she put her hand on my phone. "I need you to tell me what you're doing," she said. "Don't think I haven't noticed." I don't know," I lied. "I'm just getting used to the place." "There's more to it," she insisted. "I've seen what you do with the paintings and photos." I'm just fixing them." "No, you're not." She looked me dead in the eyes, and I could see that spark. Just like when was it the tearing out the pantry. That flame. There was no point in lying to her. I'm not moving them." "But something is." I told her what I noticed. I'd share her the photos before and after pictures, and as soon as she realized this wasn't cane toad problem anymore, she got up from the table, locked the door, and fetched her toolbox. "We're not leaving this house until we deal with this." "Can't we just call someone?" I asked. "What's the big deal?" "No, we can't," Aline said. "We're dealing with this. I'm dealing with this." "Well, I'm going to go ahead and call someone." She snatched the phone from my hand, stepped into the pantry, and dropped it in the space between the walls before I could protest. She had her hands up in a rush. "This is serious, and we need to deal with it." This time, she wasn't taking any half measures. She was tearing out walls, calling out to whatever intruder she'd imagined. She'd wake up at random times in the night, silently walking around the house, watching. She'd keep my bedroom door locked to make sure there was no distractions. Then, she got a gun. Maybe she'd always had one, but now she walked around with it. Her reasoning was, there was an intruder, and she needed to defend us. She would deal with this one way or another, and until she did, I wasn't allowed to leave. "They could take you when you leave. Whenever you're out of sight," she said. "I can't risk that." So 4 days on end, there'd be no internet, no phone, nothing but power tools and random shouts. Threats smacks, screams, all directed to this invisible foe. And yet, at night, little things would change, but never in the way that Aline would notice. Then, one morning, I woke up to this strange sound. A little vibration. I looked to the side, only to find my cell phone laying on the nightstand. It was a bit dirty and had its cracks on the corner, but it was functional. I thought that maybe Aline did it, that it was a peace offering. I walked into the hallway only to see her using screwdrivers to move an outlet from the wall. I quickly hid the phone behind my back, but it was a bit too quick on the draw. It slipped out of my hand and sailed across the floor into my room. Aline looked up. "What was that?" I couldn't make an excuse fast enough. She got up, pushed past me, and almost launched me down the stairs. She picked up the phone from disbelief and looked at me. "Are you messing with me?" she said. "Is this a joke to you?" "No," I said. "It was just there." "I'm your mother." And she bellowed, "You don't lie to me about things like this." "You mean like you lied about Kenny?" She shook her head and frowned. "Kenny?" she asked. "The dinosaur," I snapped back. "He doesn't have a name, but you keep pretending. Do you remember anything?" And I confronted her. I had asked her about when I was born. I asked her about my middle name. I asked her about my dad, our first vacation, our first car, a couple of things she could answer. A couple of them she couldn't. Maybe she was too surprised to think clearly. "You used to lay in that sun chair on the front porch," I said. "What did you used to drink when you did?" This is ridiculous. You drank your favorite drink every time you went out. What was it?" "Camper orange juice," she sighed. "That's my favorite drink. I get that all the time." "Wrong. You never drank while watching me. You never once did." We just looked at one another. A couple of uneasy thoughts crossed my mind. Maybe she wasn't my mother. I headed for the stairs. She was right behind me, wielding the screwdriver like a knife. She asked me to stop, but I kept going. I headed straight for the door, but she locked and bolted it. I got it open, but not fast enough. She caught me and slammed the door shut, leaning over me. Her faces were inches away from mine. "You'll have to wait in the basement while I fix this," she panted. "Don't make a fuss." "You're not my mom, are you?" She didn't respond. She just grabbed my arm and led me downstairs. I didn't even know the basement door had a lock. But turns out it did. It was just me, a washer, a dryer, and an old box. Nothing important. Mostly just holiday stuff. Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July. I stayed down there all day, hearing Aline tearing the place apart. She couldn't let go. No matter what she was going, she had to have her perfect house and her perfect daughter. Nothing was supposed to go wrong. But somehow, it had. Maybe she thought I would forget about the whole thing if she just finished quickly. Hell, maybe she was planning on getting me something really, really nice. But I couldn't let go of that one thought. That maybe Aline wasn't actually my mom. Maybe she was just a woman living here. Maybe she had the pictures. There were mail addresses to her from years back in the basement boxes. I couldn't make sense of it. So I waited for hours. Aline's frustration grew louder and violent. I could hear her throwing things, knocking over furniture and yelling at walls. "What do you want?" she'd scream. "Who are you?" She was still using her power tools, cutting into walls, into the furniture. I could hear something falling apart, something thumping down the stairs. And then with a crash, Alina would get mad. Until finally, she would break down crying, hysterical, in the hallway above. I tried not to listen. I had no idea what she was capable of anymore. So instead, I brought out one of those old boxes and browsed. Old bills, newspaper cancellations, birthday cards, all kind of everyday things. I didn't even bother to read most of them. They were all addressed to Aline, and there was nothing more to it. Little bits and bobs of a well-lived life. I stopped at a couple of birthday cards. There were a couple from me. I sent her one on her 40th birthday, and it was there. There were invitations to weddings, Christmas cards, well wishes, even a couple of get well cards from her when her appendix was taken out. But underneath, I found something strange. A custom print. "Good luck on the move," one card said. "We'll miss you." I turned it over. 3 friends looking into the camera. 2 looking sarcastically sad, and a third woman rolling her eyes, addressed a couple of years ago. But the woman in the middle, that one it was clearly addressed to, wasn't Aline. It was a stranger holding a fruity drink who had the same eyes as me. The Aline I knew was off to the side. A friend. The card was signed by Bella and Laura. The woman on the right was Laura, not Aline. I dropped the card on the floor and looked up. I was in a stranger's house. Someone who knew my real mother and took her place, and that she was freaking out upstairs armed with a power tool. I had no idea how much danger I was in, but I could feel it. My body tensed up. Every breath felt colder, sharper. My legs grew restless, getting ready to run. I had to do something. I put the boxes back on the shelf. She didn't need to know that I knew. I looked for the tools. Something to pop the door open with, but there was nothing. She made sure of it. Maybe I could break open something from the washer and use it as a lockpick or something. Anything. But the door popped open. Pop. Aline didn't do that. No one did. It was just open. I looked up the stairs, carefully looking out. Aline was moving around upstairs. It couldn't have been her. I opened the door, took a few steps outside, and heard for the front door. Then the floor creaked. I stopped and held my breath. Then footsteps. Aline came running down the stairs. I threw myself on the front door, and this time I got it open in time. I was out, running across the front lawn. Wet grass tangled between my toes. I held for the closest neighbor, screaming at the top of my lungs. I saw a door open across the street. Then I heard a gunshot. I dropped to the ground, covering my head. The neighbors screamed and hurried back inside. Aline, or Laura, had pulled out her handgun. She'd fired a warning shot. She grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back inside, still holding the gun. Perfectly cut grass stuck to my face as I was dragged past the forgotten sun chair. "I live here now," she yelled through gritted teeth. She moved! I live here now! You don't get to pick your mom! She pulled me back inside and locked the door. She took me upstairs into my bedroom and locked the door too. We sat down across each other from the floor with her gun casually pointing my way. We stayed there for a couple of minutes, just looking at each other. Two strangers, sharing a house. She looked different in the dark. I could see it now. I want to make things perfect, she sighed. It was supposed to be different this time. Aline was supposed to be different. What did you do? She shook her head. She moved. I just didn't file the papers. Of course. She worked at the county records. Aline's official address was still registered here. So when they looked her up, they reached Laura, still living there. And she just went for it. If I could get you, I could get anyone, she continued. Then I'd really be her. And not, well, me. She picked up the pink dinosaur plushie and casually tossed it aside. She was done pretending. And with that, she raised the gun. I have to try again, she murmured. I'm sorry. Don't do this! What choice do I have? Would you like to be me? I didn't answer. She shook her head again. Didn't think so. My tongue felt dry. A sting of assault burned my eye from cold sweat. I didn't know whether to throw myself at her or shield my face. Instead, I did nothing. My forehead felt cold as it anticipated a bullet. She tensed her finger on the trigger, but nothing happened. See, there's this thing about old houses. The shadows seem a little longer. There are noises coming out of every corner. 9 times out of 10, it's just the wind. A poorly constructed wall, or hell, maybe a cane toad. But this shadow had been different. Shadows don't fix pictures on the walls. They don't raid your pantry. And they don't put back the one picture you have of your real mom on the wall. As if trying to show you when you've been lied to. And they certainly don't put a long, dark, bony finger in the way of the trigger. But this one did. It emerged from the wallpaper, a solid shade of chromatic black, leaning over Laura like a misshapen shadow, taller, longer, slimmer, at least 7 feet tall but hunched over into a ball. It had put a long, dark finger in the way of the trigger, stopping Laura from pulling it. Her breathing quickened. She tried to push, but nothing happened. She struggled and strained, trying with 2 hands, but nothing. Instead, a second hand grasped the back of her head and smashed her straight forward into the floor. I'd never seen anything so violent. One forceful smack and she lost all of her front tooth, broken her nose, and cracked part of her forehead. It left a blood-tuffled dent on the wooden floor. The thing stopped for a moment, giving Laura a chance to grasp for air. As she did, it turned to the pink plushie and put it back on the drawer, facing outwards even now. couldn't stop itself from making things right. Maybe that was the point all along, to set things right. Labels out. Picture straight. No lies. In one swift motion, it stood up, dragging Laura along like a hapless ventriloquist puppet. It slammed the bedroom door open with its shoulders, knocking it off its hinges, clattering to the floor. Laura kicked and screamed, kicked and slapped candle holders, chairs, and photos as she went. I looked down the hallway, only to see them disappear into the bathroom. Laura couldn't form a sentence anymore, but kept making this pleading moan, even from the distance. You could hear her from spitting up teeth. But the bathroom door closed. Then there was a scream. A mirror had been broken, thumping over and over as a body was beaten to a pulp. Bones against ceramic tiles, flesh crushed into paste. I didn't even notice the sirens outside. The neighbors had called the police. I didn't notice them break down the front door coming up the stairs, but when they did, they bore witness to the same thing I did. Laura and something else locked in the bathroom. There was a short shriek as Laura was thrown out of the second-story bathroom window. I was wrapped into a blanket and taken out to a lawn. An officer held a hand up, asked me not to look. My shaking hands looked weird in the blue and red light. The neighbors were peeking out their front door again, and no one could explain what happened in the bathroom. And in the following days, no one could explain why all the chairs, photos, and candle holders had been put back in their rightful spots overnight. After that thing went by fast, Laura had willingly committed a clerical error to her service, her elaborate identity theft, and things were corrected. My biological mom flew down from Nashville, where she'd moved about 1.5 years prior. A couple of her boxes had gotten lost in the move, and she'd been fighting to get the paperwork in order. Apparently, it was as if someone had been actively fighting her efforts. Imagine that. Moving in with her is another story on its own self, a rather mundane one, but she still lounged in her shun chair, listening to the radio. She had her favorite drink on the weekends, and she knew that my pink dinosaur plushie didn't need a name to be my favorite thing. It wasn't much, but it was real. Today, I'm 27 years old. A couple of years ago, I moved back to that little community outside Crystal River. I bought that same house for myself and painstakingly fixed it up over to drawn-out summers. It was cheap, but a lot of work. Some people would question me why I'd even want to go back there. But I can't see myself living anywhere else. Yes, it was traumatic, but that wasn't the house's fault. That was Laura's. No, this is a house of little creaks and nudges, of a long shadow, of cane toads in the yards, and a picture I don't bother to straighten. And I'd rather live in this crooked home than a perfect hell. So, that was Old Houses Make Old Noises. And I will quickly say that was a really good story. I heavily enjoyed it. It reminded me of a couple stories from when I was younger. Weird memories and stuff like that. It's strange to think, because the first half, before it devolves into the full story, it kind of reminds you of when you're younger, in a way, when you live in an old house and you hear, creaking on stairs or in the wood, or think you hear a knock or something. It's something really good. The only problem that I have is the very heavy-fisted plot point of lies and truth. Because the problem is, yes, it wasn't real, and Laura is crazy. But sometimes, in reality, you can't always have something that's real, even if you beg to it. And I know that's a really depressing way to end this, but it's true. You don't really know exactly what's coming up or what's going to happen. You just have an idea and hope. Well, I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen. I hope you all have a great day or night whenever you listen to this. And thank you again for giving a listen.